Welcome back, guys. Straight from the nest. It's 1914, World War One, Wars of the World. We're going to go ahead and get ourselves started here with a intro and then the first round. See you at the end.
Hello everybody, this is Nato at the Nest, and this is the World War One scenario that you've all been waiting for. So, as usual, we'll start off with an introduction to the scenario, explain the historical background of it, then some unique things to the scenario, and I won't go into everything because this scenario, as you can see, is quite a bit larger than the other scenarios so far. So I won't go into every little nuance and rule. If something new comes up, we'll just explain it in the actual turn or in the actual turn, as there's like 4 pages of special rules specifically for this scenario, so I won't bore you with that. Go with the usual historical. The last scenario, the Russo-Japanese War, the Japanese did win. So that means that the Bolshevik Revolution and the Russian Civil War will be an aspect of this scenario. So, what started this whole thing? It's a lot more complicated than an archduke was assassinated in Sarajevo. It's a lot more complicated than that. I know some history books out there like to paint Archduke Franz Ferdinand's assassination as a cause for World War One, and that's not the case at all. It was a spark, definitely, but not the cause. In fact, when Ferdinand was assassinated, Europe, up into and including his own family, the Habsburgs, their reaction to his assassination was more or less meh, and they went about their summer holiday. It did not send shockwaves through Europe, mostly because assassination was a fairly common thing at this point in time. There had already been several, high-ranking assassinations throughout Europe, so this was just another name to add to the list. And Ferdinand belonged to the Habsburg family that ruled Austria-Hungary. He wasn't very well liked in his own family, so his own family, the Habsburgs, weren't overly excited about it. Well, like I said, it was a spark, because Austria-Hungary. Actually, let's back up. The reason why there is tension at all is pretty much because of the Ottoman Empire. Notice the last scenario that had the Ottoman Empire in it, the Ottomans reached all the way up into Romania, now they don't. So that's because the Ottoman Empire was waning, and it's called the sick man of Europe. Its power was diminishing and had lost territory, quite a significant amount of territory. It lost Greece, Romania, Bulgaria, Serbia, Montenegro, Albania. Lost all those territories. So whenever a great power leaves a certain territory, it creates a power vacuum. So there is this power vacuum in the Balkans that the Austro-Hungarians and the Russians both wanted to move into. So you got two great empires with both have their sights on the exact same territory. It's going to cause tensions. Now, what what brought Austria and Russia into contention was Serbia, that little country right there. Austria wanted Serbia. Russia wanted to keep Serbia out of Austrian hands. There's the political reason. Russians wanted the Balkans for themselves, but the Russians also had or at least claimed a higher moral reasoning. The Serbians were part of a group of people referred to as the Slavs, who the Russians happened to be, and the Russians viewed themselves as the protectors of all the Slavs in the world. So Russia made it quite clear that any move on Serbia by Austria would bring in Russia. Now, Russia and France had a military alliance with each other because Germany had recently unified. It's only had been a unified country for a couple decades at this point. And Germany was a rising power in Europe. Actually, it was a rapidly rising power in Europe, and it had quickly become the most powerful country on the continent in terms of militarily and economically. So that threatened France and England, who had been the powers to be on the continent and were now being quickly replaced by Germany. So, and then this is after the Franco-Prussian War, where Prussia, Germany didn't exist at the time. The Franco-Prussian War in 1898 or 7, I want to say, where Prussia pretty much swept through France and defeated it in less than a month. And that stigma stayed with France ever since, and ever since then France had made alliances to try to corner Germany, so that any future war with Germany they would have friends, and preferably have friends on the other side of Germany. So France and Russia entered into alliance to counter the rising German quote-unquote threat. So Germany made an alliance with Austria because they're natural allies. Austria, Hungary, but Austria was pretty much the ruling factor in it. The Habsburgs were Austrian, and the Austrians were pretty much German. Spoke German, same culture, same language, same history. So Germany and Austria were natural allies. And let's see, so what made Germany twitchy was Russia. Because Russia, as you can see from the last scenario that Russia was involved in, there's a lot more factories in Russia now. That's because Russia was rapidly expanding and growing economically. It was catching up to Germany. And Germany saw this as a threat to them because Germany was the top economic power in Europe, and they didn't want to be replaced by Russia. So the German mentality, was they thought that a war with Russia was inevitable. So the German mentality is, if we're going to go to war with Russia, it needs to be now, while they're still on top. If they wait too long, they're afraid Russia was going to surpass them, and Germany wouldn't be able to defeat Russia a couple years down the road. So the Germans, like I said, the German mentality is war was inevitable, so it'd be better to go to war now while we're ahead than later when we're not. So that's what created this kind of triangular tension between France, Germany, Austria, and Russia. Now, what the English contention was Kaiser Wilhelm, the Emperor of Germany, decided it'd be a grand idea to build a fleet that could challenge Europe. If you've been watching our videos diligently, you've heard me say on several occasions, was the one thing that will make Britain violent in the blink of an eye. That's anything that will threaten their naval supremacy. You know, England's an island nation, their entire existence depends on their navy. So Germany's building this big battle fleet with the only purpose being to challenge the British fleet, and that naturally causes the British to get twitchy. And you know, most people have heard of the naval arms race between England and Germany. You know, so that's where the British tension gets involved in. The Ottomans, they just were trying to save their empire. You know, it's crumbling fast. You know, they've been losing territory for decades. So the Ottoman stake in this was just to make sure their empire survived, and you know, best case scenario, try to regain some of their lost territory. Japan's stake in all this is England and Japan actually formed a military alliance in 1902, and Japan entered the war mostly just to honor its treaty with England. Of course, they had, you know, ulterior motives too. Japan thought they could grab some territory out of the war, you know, help England win the war, and then they can get Japan hoped they could get some victor spoils and expand their own territory, because Japan was looking to build its own empire, because it was rapidly modernizing just like Russia. And America, they just wanted to stay out, because America was extremely isolationist at this time. So that's a very, 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 very brief overview of what's going on, you know, 1914. I could, you know, I'm leaving a lot of stuff out. I could easily talk about this for, you know, the nuances that started this catastrophe. I could easily eat up 2 hours talking on just the interplay between all the powers, politically, economically, and militarily, but that would probably bore you guys to death, so we'll just move on. Things specific to this scenario. With England, we are splitting England into 3 sub-factions, so, you know, the European Brits, and you know, the Far East Command, and Anzac. The scenario starts in 1911 and goes to 1922, so it's not just going to be World War I. Kind of minor wars / minor events that are going to be part of it. You know, there's going to be the Mexican Civil War of 1910 to 1921. There's going to be the Italian-Ottoman War, 1911, 1912. There's going to be the Third Balkan War, or Balkan Crisis, of 1912 to 13. Chinese Civil War is going to be implemented. That's 1911 to 1912. We're going to have the Second Moroccan Crisis. That's not a war, that'll be an event. We'll explain that in detail first term, because that's when that happens. We're going to have the America's hunt for Pancho Villa, you know, the kind of a overflow of the Mexican Civil War. 1916, Pancho Villa, who is a more or less Mexican rebel / bandit, outlaw, whatever you want to call it, during the Mexican Civil War, he actually crossed the border and attacked an American town in New Mexico, I believe, and that caused Wilson to order the army to go into Mexico, occupy large portions of Mexico, and hunt Villa down. It did cause several large skirmishes between the American forces and various Mexican rebels. There wasn't just one rebel group, there was several different rebel groups fighting against the government and fighting against themselves. Is kind of chaotic. But notable names were involved in this hunt for Villa. Pershing, Patton, MacArthur. They all got their kind of first experience of command and combat in the Mexican Civil War. Experience that would pay off once they got to the big show in Europe in 1918. Let's see. A lot of new units. Planes, fighters, dreadnoughts. I'm forgetting some. Submarines. Duh. Submarines. New unit. Then, of course, as the technology advances, we're going to start introducing tanks and aircraft carriers. That'll be like near the very end, but there's a bunch of other new stuff, but I'm totally drawing a blank here. There's a lot more technologies. Previous scenarios have only had one, maybe two technologies that you can research. There's now 6. Trenches, that's another thing that's new. One of the major mechanics of this scenario is, starting 1915, the various nations can start building trenches, and if they have a trench built in the territory, infantry defend at a 4, and any infantry attacking that trench line only attack at a 1. So, massive advantage to the defender, and the vast majority of the technologies are geared towards closing that gap. So, one of the things you can research is poison gas, and that if implemented, that reduces the defending infantry to a 3 instead of a 4. And then you can also research creep and barrage, which bumps the attacking infantry to a 2 or less. So, the goal of the technology is to close that gap between attacking and defending hit values, to actually make attacking viable again. Then obviously tanks come out that will help even further. Advanced fighters, more powerful fighters, the tanks, the creeping barrage, the poison gas, and then there's certain unique units, like Germans will eventually be able to train stormtroopers, or a special German elite unit who their job before a main attack would be to usually at night cross over into the enemy trenches, infiltrate the enemy trenches, and just cause utter chaos and havoc just prior to the main attack. The British will have miners. They can. What England did historically is England had a pretty productive coal industry on the home island. So what England did, and it was all underground, So what England did is they brought those miners over from England, brought them to the front line, and had them dig tunnels underground to the enemy trenches, and then they'd pack those tunnels with explosives and blow them up. And, destroy the trenches and just kill anyone in the blast radius, and then the British infantry would rush into the hole created by the huge crater. So, things like that are designed towards, closing that gap and defeating the, really the huge defensive bonus that trenches give. As you can see, Zeppelins are introduced in this. Some new models, as you can see, the German Dreadnought and the German Cruiser. The American Dreadnought cruisers might be a little hard to see, but Japanese Dreadnought cruisers for the last scenario. All these can be found at historicalboardgaming.com. Let's see. I feel like I'm forgetting a bunch of stuff, but I suppose I could tell you who's playing who. Viper will be playing the Central Powers of so Germany, Austria, Ottomans, and Bulgaria, and I will be playing the Entente Powers, which is pretty much everybody else. England, France, Italy, Russia, Japan. Eventually America, Romania. Will join as a minor power at some point. Same with Portugal. Other events that will be sprinkled throughout. Is the Irish Revolt. I want to say 1916. The Irish did revolt in Ireland. There'll be the Libyan Revolt. There'll be the Arab Revolt. The Russian, the Bolshevik Revolution, and then the Russian Civil War. That will be included, once the Russian Civil War kicks off and the Bolsheviks, or the Reds, communists, whatever you want to call them. The Soviet-Polish War will be implemented. Oh, and then an interesting twist about the technologies. Like I said, the technologies are geared towards closing that defensive bonus that trenches give. But to avoid players just sitting and not attacking, not moving, because eventually you're gonna come across someone that's gonna do that. With that big of a gap, someone or most of the players eventually are just going to not attack and just sit there and wait for the technology to catch up. So to avoid the first half of the big war, everyone just sitting on their hands, not attacking, not all, but a good portion of the technologies are only unlocked once you've incurred X amount of casualties. So you can't just pay money to buy dice to roll to get these technologies. You have to actually suffer a certain amount of casualties to get these technologies. So the only way to get these technologies is to bite the bullet and attack these trench lines to avoid those players that will just sit on their hands and turtle up and just spend 3/4 of the game just building and not attacking, because that's a personal pet peeve of mine. That's extremely annoying for me. People just sit there the whole game and build these super stacks of units and then never use them. that just drives me insane. So, so the technologies are and how you get them are geared towards forcing people to bite the bullet and make these suicidal attacks because, like it or not, that's what happened historically in World War One. So, convoy raiding, that's exact same as the 36, Global War 36. Russia will have a incremented production. Starts off at 3. Each turn Russia rolls a dice to increase its production. America will be similar. It won't start off at full production. It'll start off at 10, but the way America increases its production is unique. Remember I mentioned there's convoy raiding, so America increases its production by how much England loses through German submarine convoy raids. So, say Germany decides to raid the London Halifax line, and they manage to, sink 3 IPPs worth of production, and that happens, and England has to pay 3 IPPs to the bank immediately. Well, when that happens, American production will also go up by 3 to represent the growing tension between America and Germany because of the, unrestricted submarine warfare. The famous Lusitania and all that. So it's going to make the German player have to kind of do a balancing act. So with the submarine rating, how much is it? It hurts England, but at the same time it makes America stronger. So America will come into the war that much stronger because so if Germany just goes all out on the submarine warfare, it could hurt England pretty badly, but it's going to cause America to be coming into the war a lot stronger than if it won it. So it's going to make the German player, and in our case Viper, have to kind of do a balancing act between how much damage production-wise against England, how much of that is going to be worth it versus, making America steadily stronger. And see, that's all I can really think of. I'm sure as soon as I shut off this video, I'll think of something else. But whatever I've forgotten to mention, we'll pick up in the actual turns. So with that, we'll come back with the first turn, which is the 1911 turn. I can't remember if it's fall or spring. I'll have to look at the notes. But anyways, we'll come back with the first turn of the scenario. It'll be 1911, and the only wars going on at the time is the Mexican Civil War, the Chinese Civil War, and the Italian-Ottoman War. So we'll see you then.
Hi Axis and Allies players, welcome back to the nest. It is finally that time, what you guys have requested in our comments below that we appreciate so much. Yes guys, it is time for World War I. It is 1914 on the board. Actually, we are going to start a little bit early, and there's a couple of things I'm going to throw in there for that. The Moroccan crisis, for those of you who don't know what that is, what happened was in Morocco, which was a French territory, they kind of just didn't like their Sultan because the Sultan was a French puppet, and so the Moroccans decided to take action, as most people do when they don't like their leader, and they rioted. So the Sultan and his beautiful guards that he had barricaded themselves into the palace, and so the riots continued. Well, Germany decided that that was a great opportunity to take just another territory from France, because Germany, and they sailed their cruiser down from Sea Zone 49 down to Sea Zone, or excuse me, 48 down to Sea Zone 79, and sat in port. Well, France decided they didn't like this idea very much. Why? Because France and Germany, and this has gone on for years. I don't know why, we don't need to explain that. So France sails one of their ships down there. Well, we took that into effect into our game. So what we've done is we've actually instilled that. So if the German ship does come down and decide to influence Morocco, as we would put it, then they could sit there, and then France could bring their ship down and they could sit there. Now the fun part is take a d6, okay? You roll it. It's an influence roll. Whatever you get is going to be your score. Now for me in particular, I got a 2. Nato, who plays as France and the Entente powers, he also rolled a 2. So again, another tiebreaker, just like in the Civil War. So we had to figure this one out. So what we decided to do, in the event there is a tie of the influence rolls, what we're actually going to do is roll until somebody wins. So if France wins, nothing changes. Everything stays the same, the war continues on, and we just play the game. If Germany wins, the Germany gets an influential partition into Morocco. No land changes hands, but Germany gets a +3 IPP for the rest of the game. And Germany won. So I've got a +3 IPP just for that particular situation. Another part of the board, we have the Italian-Ottoman War going on, and we're going to focus on that here in a second, but that did not turn out nearly as the way it looked different in my head. I will say that, but we'll get to that here in a second. Another one that we've got going on is the Chinese Rebellion versus the Qing Dynasty. That one, for what it's worth, the way we have that one set up is that once it's pretty much a one-hit wonder, the Chinese Rebellion is going to go, and then later on the Qing Dynasty is going to go, and whoever ends up with the most territories and most IPP points wins China. In our particular scenario, the Chinese Rebellion won, the Qing Dynasty did not. It was 11-7 as far as IPP points are concerned, and it became the Republic of China, which later on becomes KMT China. Now we're going to go to the board, and we're going to explain this Italian-Ottoman thing, because again, that went way different in my head. All in, balls out, became the aggressive player that I am, and focus in over here NATO, and we will show them that there is no longer an Italian fleet sitting here, because the Ottomans took 2 cruisers in there and wiped out their dreadnought, their cruiser, and their transport. Don't ask me how that happened. Again, that went way different in my head. I did not expect that to happen, and I did not expect that to actually work, so I had only purchased these 2 militia and this hospital right here, because I was actually planning on putting those here, because part of Italian, of the Italy-Ottoman War was for them to bring troops down and take Tripoli and Kufra. That's not going to happen, because now the Italian-Ottoman War is over, and controversial to history, the Ottomans actually won. In Germany, got some purchasing going on, some infantry units, and I pulled a fighter in and kind of spread my stuff out. We've got my Zeppelin sitting here, which can attack factories, so you guys know that. The British, they've got all kinds of stuff going on. They put a fighter down here in South Africa. They picked up some dudes. Over here in the Eastern Empire, they've got just some basic militia going on. They got some pieces that are moving around here. And for Anzac, not a lot going on. They put a cruiser on the battle board to start building it. And this is kind of what they got. Also, Germany has property over in the Pacific, not familiar to a lot of people that they understand. So Germany took their cruisers, because part of Japan's victory objectives is to take take Caroline Islands and the Marshall Islands, and then Anzac needs to take New Guinea. Also, Japan needs to take this one right in here, Taiwan, or Taiwan, excuse me, in order to make their victory objectives as well. So you can see all the Chinese Republic pieces that are in here. These are NATO pieces, but we use them for the Qing Dynasty for this particular game because we don't have Qing Dynasty pieces. So Russia has to roll to increase their production value. They're at a stalemate on their production, and that's just so that it evens out. Otherwise, Russian production would be like 70 something, and then they could put this swarm of dudes all over the board, and then there would be no game. So we made a balance act of that. Russia rolled a 5 to increase their production, so they are now sitting at a level 8 for theirs. We've got Austria here. Didn't move any of the ships in Austria for now, but again, I am playing the Central Powers. One of my objectives, I have to take Serbia, Romania, and Northern Italy. So you can see I've got a bunch of green stuff here. That doesn't mean necessarily that I'm going to be taking it out because I'm only sitting at 7 IPPs per turn. So that's pretty much the first round right now. I am going to be looking at a couple of different things. I think we're going to try to do a little bit of a balancing. Oh, Mexico. I almost forgot Mexico. So Mexico Revolution is going on right now. So our white pieces here, those are federals, and our yellow are Mexican rebels. Now, I originally came in here up against NATO's 2 federal units, and I had 3 rebel units, and I wiped them out. First roll. End of story. So we decided that's probably not the best of ideas since that war actually went on for about 10 years. And both sides are supposed to roll a d6 to at their purchase phase to find out what their placement is going to be. So depending on what you roll here, whether you get a 2 or a 6 or 5, doesn't matter, that would be the amount of infantry that you would place in your particular spot. I happen to actually roll a 6. NATO rolled a 1. He's getting diced again, guys, and that's okay. But so we changed it up. So we made it so it was 4 to 3 instead of 2 to 3, so that the Federals did have some sort of placement in Mexico. And as you can see, I still have this area contested. It is a one-on-one shot. But over in western Mexico, I have 6 coming on the board across that border to the other side that will take effect into the next round. So there's a couple things to this. With Italy and the Ottoman War no longer active, which it definitely didn't see that going in my head. I figured I had nothing, I threw nothing, and I won everything. That happened. That happens in games. So now Italy's influence and strategic landing is going to be really central towards Europe. They're going to go after Austria to keep them out of northern Italy. They're going to keep Germany off of their back as much as they can. But now the Ottomans have to concentrate on Egypt, and they've got to concentrate on Russia and stuff like that. So there's that going on. It blockaded the Mediterranean for the English when the English and the Ottomans go to war together, excuse me, in 1914. But right now the sea zone is open, so that could change. England has to focus their points to Egypt, to Cairo, to Kufra, to all the way up into Persia and stuff like that. And you know, the Ottomans are now facing a north and south war instead of just, you know, just going towards Italy and trying to keep them under control. If Italy had won, then Italy's forces would have been split, trying to maintain themselves in the Mediterranean and not being hit by Austria, and then not being hit by the Ottomans again. A lot of changes that happened in this particular round, and it's only the first round. We've got a lot of rounds to go because there's 23 rounds in this particular game that we have developed. So stick around, like it, live it, love it. Coming up next is the spring of 1912. We'll see you on the next round. If you have anything to say, shoot us a comment below. Don't forget to subscribe. Thanks, guys. We'll be right back. Hi, Axis and Allies players, and thanks for watching The Nest. Like what we're doing, go ahead and hit a squat on that like button. Share it to your favorite social media. Want to see more videos just like this? Go ahead and subscribe. We'll have more coming to you right from original Axis and Allies from Milton Bradley, Axis and Allies in 1914 by Hasbro, Wizards of the Coast, Shapeways.com, and HistoricalBoardGaming.com, where you can find all of your expansions and other pieces right there online ready for you. We'll see you next time right here, straight from the nest.